Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for your patience. We'll give it a little second and let everyone keep trickling in. What a time to be alive. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right. I think we have everyone who's RSVP'd in the room. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Afua Owusu, and I am the Director of News and Local Content for Waggle Broadcasting and the executive producer and creator of On the Block. It's a news magazine in partnership with Block Club Chicago on WCIU TV. In addition to those roles, I also serve as the first vice president of the Chicago Midwest chapter of the National Academy of Television Arts and Science, also known as NATAS. Our chapter here is made up of, our organization is made up of 19 regional chapters, and those chapters spread across the country. And each year, Emmy Awards are awarded to those journalists, producers, and storytellers who have submitted excelling copy, stories, and feature reports. They also administer regional scholarships and student production award programs. If you're interested in learning how you can apply for a scholarship, we'll have Rebekah's information for you at the very end, and you can reach out to her. Our chapter's DMA, the eligibility for applying for an Emmy means you must be working in these specific markets. These 12, this DMA spreads between 3 states and 12 cities. So if you're working in one of these areas or you're a student in one of these areas, you are eligible to submit for an Emmy Award. Please now allow me to introduce our panelists. Starting with Diana Borri. Diana had served for 4 decades at WMAQ's NBC5 Chicago, serving in multiple roles dealing with broadcast standards, programming, and regulatory affairs. She was also the first woman to serve as president of our chapter of the Chicago Midwest chapter of National Arts and Television Science. Rebekah Cowling is our executive director. She's been with NATAS Chicago here for 24 years. She has helped organize almost every event that you have ever seen happen, from the Emmy Awards to workshops like these. In 2013, Rebekah also received an Emmy plaque in recognition for her dedication and service. This is the first time the award has been bestowed. Next, there's Cornelius Mack. He's the creative marketing director for CBS Chicago. He's been a writer and producer in the market for nearly 20 years. He graduated from North Carolina at Chapel Hill with a BA in radio and television. He is also the recipient of several awards, including 6 regional Emmy Awards, 2 Silver Domes, a Peter Lisagor Award, and a Promex Gold Award. Lastly, we have Jamie Caesar. Jamie's been a 30-year veteran in the area. She's produced for legendary WTTW, working on programs like Sneak Peeks, Downstage, and Golden Apple. Since 2001, she's also headed her own production company, Caesar Salad Productions, which is honestly one of the creative names I've heard of. Great job on wordplay with your last name there, Jamie. And she's also a recipient of numerous awards, including 9 Emmy Awards, 2 Public Broadcasting Awards, a Peter Lisagor Award, the Gracie Award, the Woman in Film Focus Achievement Award. Jamie was also inducted into the Silver Circle for the Chicago Midwest chapter. Lastly, that brings us to today's moderator, who is literally just got off air. So thank you so much for joining us here. It's WLS-TV, ABC7 Eyewitness News. Is Mark Rivera. Mark served as the weekend morning anchor and reporter. Prior to his time here in Chicago, Mark was at WTSP in Tampa, where he worked as the station's morning anchor and political reporter. Mark is also a graduate of the University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana. And so with that, I will turn things over to Mark, who will kind of get us started. Mark.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. And I hope we have a really fruitful discussion about how you can enter different categories, everything that's new this year. My goodness, you heard all of our panelists and all of their accolades. I am but a lowly, unawarded anchor, weekend anchor here at ABC7 Chicago. So thank you all for sharing your time with us as well and your expertise. We really, really appreciate it. And I want to start today because we're going to look at three different topics in this meeting today. So first is the call for entries, what's new in 2024, content, you see it there, and then of course judging and why that's so important. So first we need to start with understanding some of the changes that are new this year. So I want to start with, I would like to start with Rebekah to talk a little bit about that, as well as Diana. And Rebekah, let's start just talking a little bit about what's new this year, because there are a couple of new categories.
Yeah, we added a couple new categories this year. One is, you'll see it right here on the slide. One is something that we haven't done in a number of years. Category 101, it's News Excellence. And that award only goes to the news director. Category 102 is Sports Excellence. And we could talk about these two categories more in depth, because I know Diana and Jamie have judged, and Cornelius has judged these categories before for other chapters, so they can, if you're interested in those. In 210, we added, excuse me, technology. I believe 210 is business consumer. So we added that as a new topic within that category. And then category 302 is sportscast. Nostalgia content is 419, because we're seeing more and more nostalgic content in terms of like the GN at 75 years, that kind of content that's becoming more prevalent. Category 609 is multimedia journalists, MMJ, which is supposed to recognize one-man bands or one-woman bands or what have you, a person who does it all in terms of editing, camera, reporting, producing, etc., to get the story on the air. So those are the new ones.
Okay. And I just want to remind everybody that if you have questions, please feel free to submit them, write them into the chat box, and we're going to try and answer as many of those as we can today as well. We didn't say that off the top, but just so anyone watching this knows, you can do that, and we'll try and get your questions answered. How about news excellence? How does that differ from some of the other newscast categories?
Well, the idea of this is to get all of your news ducks in a row, so you can talk about how you do breaking news, your newscast. It's a chance to put in a promo when you do a proof of performance promo for covering that hurricane or that tornado or that giant fire or some cataclysmic event. So it's a way to talk about the efforts and the successes of your entire news operation. And it's sort of a conglomerate of those things with 1 second of black between. So it's sort of an all-inclusive spot. Usually you can just enter one newscast, or when you're doing breaking news, it's like the first 15 minutes of something. But this is a chance to showcase all of the news efforts of a news organization.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that it included sort of that proof of performance, like after the fact, weather event, weather coverage, or anything like that. That's interesting that that's included there as sort of that package of here's how we cover something big.
Right, but you're not creating a narrative like with a host that says we did this, then we did this, then we did this. It's actually the footage itself. You don't create a package and put those things in it. You just include those things.
And the narrative is very important in something like that. The narrative that you write up that goes along with the entry.
The written description, yes.
The description that you're entering in is really vital to sort of demarcate those different things.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. In terms of the numbering, I know there's some difference in the numbering this year. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I have to say this is kind of a selfish thing of mine. when we had 1A, 2A, 3A, 6A, 6B, a lot of the chapters now have moved to this category 101 or 200s because we find it's easier because we're working in Excel all day long to sort. So this allows us to sort and work in Excel very easily in terms of numbering the categories. And also it's just a very clear demarcation of like what the different subsets are. So, there's special achievement, news, sports content, programming, spots, craft. So it's very clear of the different key topics that, that the call for entry covers. So we're hoping this is a little more clear, instead of like saying 6F, we could just say it's a 200 category. So it's a news category. And so the people are fairly clear about what's going on.
Okay, nice. I think that makes a lot of sense. So keep it all nice and easy in the categories. Okay, that's great.
Right.
In terms of other changes that have happened since last year, what are some of the other ones?
So National passed a rule. We talked about it a lot during the rules meeting about making news and short form categories 15 minutes. They used to be 10 minutes. So now they made it a little longer. We combined environment, weather with environment and science, because there's a lot of, we were finding when we had a different subsection for weather, we used to have one category for weather, but we weren't receiving a ton of entries in that category. So that's why we put weather with environment and science. We also added multiple reports, changed breaking news. It used to be breaking news, spot news, single report. Now it's breaking spot news, multiple reports. A number of the stations said to us, hey, one 15-minute piece isn't enough to really showcase the breadth of what we were doing that day and in terms of the category, the subject matter that we were covering. So we heard them out, and this is another category that we could have chosen among the national list of categories. So we added this, and we'll see how it goes. I mean, everything we put in categories because we want to see how people respond to them, sort of test them out, get feedback from you. So all the feedback that you give us is helpful. So if anyone has feedback about the categories that are chosen, please let us know.
Okay, there we go. And
can I just say one more thing?
Oh,
too,
yeah, of course.
This last thing. Eligible roles. So please pay attention to that in the category descriptions and specify the exact role that you played in the production of each entry to prove eligibility. Because we are a chapter that's just a flat rate entry system. We can add, you can have up to 12 people on an entry without putting in a special form to the rules committee for approval. Because once you go beyond 12, you got to submit a form. But we want to know that if you do list 12 people, we want to know what each 12 people, each person did. We want every single person listed to be equal in terms of their contribution and their value to the production. Because we're finding that we don't want, people who maybe were just participated in a video one day or didn't do as much as, say, the executive producer or the supervising producer, who really were the key people. So that's what that's about. Sorry.
No, you don't need to apologize at all. That's really important. And everybody who's involved in something that's going to be awarded by the Emmys should absolutely be, have the same kind of role that others are playing for that same exact.
Right, because a statue is a statue regardless. There are no tiers of statues. So if you win an Emmy statue, you should have participated as much as your supervising producer as this. You should have been as key as in the involvement of the piece.
Rebekah, as opposed to the programming awards, which it just goes to the producer, the news. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, great point. That's a great point. You guys aren't making bigger statues for, different. No, of course. It's one statue. That's good. So let's talk a little bit about clearing up some misconceptions and any confusion in years past. The order that you send in the name of entrants. Why is that so important? And maybe Diana, you can talk about that.
Well, in some cases, there may be more than one person eligible, and how Rebekah handles this from the housekeeping perspective is that if that first person is the entrant, that's the person who gets the statue. In many chapters, they charge an entry fee for every name. So if there were 3 people eligible to be on this entry, they would charge 3 entry fees, and they give out 3 statues. In our chapter, we have grandfathered this in because this is the way we have done it all these years, and they've allowed us to continue this. We charge 1 fee, even if there's 3 names or 5 names. And as a result, we only have 1 statue awarded. The others who win are eligible to purchase one. So the differentiation on the first name means that's the person who will get the statue at.
And just to be clear, right, to be clear, is it possible to change the order after you've submitted?
Rebekah?
Before nominations, you can change things. This is why we release a master list. So you can see your entry and all the names and say, oh, wait, maybe this person should be first. There is a fee to change things because we want you to really think about this when you're entering. Who should be that first person that gets the statuette? And, I get a lot of requests after nominations, which we cannot allow in any circumstances. And I heard many, many, many stories through the years, and it breaks my heart, but no changes are allowed in the listing of entrants 10 days following nominations. And there are absolutely no exceptions to this rule.
This is a national rule, by the way.
Yeah. And this is a rule too that a number of chapters want to just kill outright, where that no changes are allowed at all. So allowing these 10 days is a way for people, because we want people to pay attention to your entry the first time you're entering it and want it to be, what it is. Don't, change it just because it's nominated and you think, oh, so and forth should be on here because this and that and the other. We really want you to think about it while you're entering. So.
All right, that is good to know. And I know Afua was saying that she's been burned by this in the past too. So absolutely, you guys, if you're going to be submitting for the Emmys, really think about who is on that list, who is first, and make sure that that's the way it should be before you submit.
Yeah,
that's just the best.
And just know, like our entry process, you would be paying a lot more in the entries way if we charged per name. It would be a much higher fee and higher cost. So we're trying to save. I know everyone thinks, I don't know, but anyway, we're trying to keep the fees low in the front end. You know what I mean? So you can so then you're not paying all this money ahead of time without knowing, what's going to happen with the entry. So we're trying to be fair. So,
and regardless of whether you get the statue, if you are on that, if your name is attached to it, you're an Emmy winner, and that's a really important thing to realize as well. The statuette is very symbolic and important, but if you are in a group and your name is on that list and you win an Emmy, you're an Emmy winner with a statue or not. So so just be very mindful of that. We do have a question from the audience for breaking news, spot news. This is from Stephanie W. Multiple reports category. Could a reporter submit several live shots throughout the day covering one single breaking news event? Is that what the category is calling for the breaking news, spot news, multiple reports category?
Diana, do you want to tackle that?
Yeah, it depends how far into the day. I mean, you might come on the air and be first on the air. So though your bragging rights are that you were the first on the air with the story, and then you have an update 2 or 3 more times. But if you're submitting something that happened at 3 in the afternoon, and then you do 4 pieces and the last one is the 10 o'clock update, that might not be exactly fair in the terms of the breaking news, because it evolved over 7 hours and you ended up putting a finished piece in that 10 o'clock news. So there's a time limit on it as well. So you couldn't do so many stories that it's longer than the entry allowable time. It's basically to give you some opportunities to update the breaking story, but not necessarily to do like the next morning recap of it.
Right. So I'm looking at the definition of the category, and the entry should be a composite of at least 2 reports on the same topic as they are originally broadcast or streamed. So entry may include live or taped elements and online video content. So.
Okay, that makes sense. So coverage of that event that you're updating periodically throughout the day, but not like a next day, next week
Right.
kind of
It
thing.
should be 2 reports on the same topic, is what I'm saying. 1 second of black must be between the 2.
Minimum 2.
Yeah.
Minimum 2. Okay.
Yeah, at least 2 is what they're saying. So, yeah, and it's a 30-minute, it's a 30-minute time limit. So it says it's exempt from composite and excerpt limit rules. So like Diana said, it could be more than 2, it could be 5, 6, what have you. So.
Got it. Okay. We do have another question coming in, hot off the presses. Have any new categories for audio been added? Or is post/live/music, or I'm waiting for the rest of the comments to come in. Hold on one sec. Let me see if I can find this. Here we go. Okay. Have any new categories for audio been added, or is post/live/music all under the one craft category from Sam F?
There are no plans at this moment to add any new audio categories. There's something called category viability. We have to have at least 3 entries for a category to remain viable. And if we don't get 3 entries in a given year in that category, we have to not offer it that year. And audio is one of those categories that we don't often get many entries in. So sometimes we're on the brink of not having it be eligible. So when we get 30 entries or 40 entries in a category, we then look to subdivide. But since audio is a very low threshold entry, we don't have any plans at this time to add new audio categories.
And just so you know, audio is for live and post-production. It doesn't include music composition in that category. So music composition is not included in our categories right now. It's just audio, live, and post-production.
Okay, gotcha. And in terms of the nostalgia category, I think this is an interesting question. There's 2 kind of variants of this question from 2 people. So Hermine H is saying, for the new category 419 nostalgia, does that mean or include history of an event? Or like, to me, and I'll kind of riff on this question too, because I'm curious, is this category for, like you were mentioning, Rebekah, looking back at a station's history, kind of promotional content in that way of like, showing the history of the television station? Or Lance M is talking about, can you submit a story about it, like a historic candy store that still makes, candy like they did 100 years ago?
So I'm looking at, I just put the definition of the category in the chat. So it's for excellence in content consisting of retro or throwback topics of a nostalgic or historical nature. Yeah, we do have a documentary category for historical that I think would be more appropriate, if you have something like a really big documentary on like a historical topic. Diana, have you judged this? Has anyone
Yeah.
judged this category before?
I have,
I've judged it, and it's mostly like history of it could be like a history of a candy store, but from 50 years ago or something, historical things, but short, sometimes short pieces. But it could be long. I guess you know, in a way, it's another place to put your content as opposed to a documentary category. It sort of gives you a little leeway for the nostalgia. And in some cases, I think it's better.
Yeah, that's interesting. I remember just from my own experience doing a story after Queen Elizabeth passed that same day, looking back at her connections to Chicago when she visited, and all of we were able to get historical footage from the Chicago History Museum and talk to people who were there, and that something that would fit into that category?
it would, except that this is more a program category. It's not a news category per se. So
Got it.
we don't have like a news nostalgia category, perhaps, but
Right.
But
I worked
if
on a
it-
doc. Yeah, I worked on a doc about the 50s and 60s in Chicago. This would be perfect for it.
Got it. Okay. I hope that helps in terms of your questions about that category. So hopefully that helped.
yeah, it's nostalgia and history combined
Got it. Nostalgia and history. Okay.
in the definition there.
If there are no other questions right now about the categories themselves, we can start talking about content and bring in our patiently waiting panel to talk a little bit about all of the important things that you need to think about when you're submitting. So I'd like to welcome Cornelius and Jamie. Thank you again both for being here and taking the time and for your patience this morning as we work through all of these important aspects of submissions for the Emmys and what's new this year. So tell us a little bit about, and I'll start with you, Cornelius. How do you determine what to submit? What makes a good Emmy submission? And I know you see right there in the middle of your screen, content is king, right? This is a television contest. We're talking about making good TV. So what does that mean to you, Cornelius?
I'll say that, for myself as both an entrant and as a judge, you got to be your most harsh critic, going into it. In my heart of hearts, I'm a writer, and I've never written anything that I didn't think was worthy of Shakespeare. But I have to be critical, realizing that that's not the case. So I think what I've seen a lot as a judge, you can tell that people have been excited about their work, and maybe it was their first thing that they ever got produced, or the only thing that they did that year. But I think after the blush wears off, take a moment and really look at it in the context of, maybe within the context of your own work. What else have you done in this year, and judge it against that. And then look around. I mean, we've got so much content available to us these days. Take a look at what you've seen, and if you feel if it rises to that level or above that level, then go for it. Here's the deal. I can't speak for the board, but I'm sure they will take your money for your entry anyway. But if you really want to be considered to win, just take that moment. Be a little harsh on yourself, be a little realistic, and then judge your work based on what you've seen other people do as well.
I think that's really good advice. Kindred spirits here on the writing, my friend. I mean, we love it, right? We love our work, but it doesn't always love us when we're entering. So let me ask you, Jamie, in terms of titling the submission, how important is the title that you're branding your submission with?
Well, I'm more of a programming person than a news person. So that's where my point of view is coming from. And so title of a show, it's important, but for me, it's the content. Now the news people might tell you something else, and I know they will, but for me, it's all about the content. And so what I'm looking for is something that grabs me right from the very beginning, right from the first frame. And as you see in this, on the frame here, first impressions, longer views, I mean, I would go with something that's short and sweet and to the point, that has the beginning, middle, and end, and that has zing to it. Because I've seen, I've judged many Emmy entries, and I would say there have been pieces that I've seen that have been an hour long, that's a simple wide shot, and you know, maybe not a great way to go, but the other thing is that I'm going to just give you an example of one thing that I saw that has still stayed with me. That it was a Colorado fire. I think it was in Boulder, and the producer told it from the point of view of residents in the town, and they had their cell phone footage, and it was all sound on tape with no narrator track. And it was so compelling. I mean, you would think like cell phone footage, but it was so compelling as to the beginning of the fire, when it first started, to when it was ablaze, as opposed to somebody standing in front of a fire. And it's also, I mean, I'm not going to drone on, but creativity for me sells. Everybody else is different, but that is really something that sells to me. How can you tell your story in a creative way that makes it pop? So that I can go on, but I'll just stop right there for now.
Hey,
No, I
Mark,
think
could
that's.
I say one more
Oh
thing?
my gosh, absolutely, go for it.
So, you know, and just as Jamie was saying, I'm not a news guy. I'm a promo guy. I mean, I've actually, produced a couple of, documentaries as well. But what I tell my producers, and what I try to tell myself, and which I think is good advice for your nomination, is your entry an express train, just like a promo. It's like when the audience gets on at the beginning and there's nothing that distracts them or slows them down until you get to the end. You don't want there to be any place that they can jump off. So think about that, if you're, in your producing, just in general, but in your entry, can you nail them, get them in there in the first moment, first second, and keep them until the end.
I think oh, go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, and I think what that also speaks to is thinking about your content before you're even entering your Emmy. What are you creating? Is it something that you're just doing to do it, or that it's again creative in terms of the camera work, in terms of the writing, in terms of the editing, and does that follow the story? So that's things that you can think of even before you get to entering your Emmy. And so then it's that much easier when you enter, because your product is really excellent, as Cornelius said.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's to both of your points. I mean, that's what making good TV is, right? And that's what you should be thinking of when you are creating your pieces, whether they be promos, whether they be news, news stories, anything like that. When you're putting that package together, that's exactly what you need to be thinking out from the get-go. So I think, especially from both of your perspectives in promotions, right? I mean, in promotions, you have such limited time to grab someone's attention too. You're talking about 15, 30 seconds, or, shorter than a package sometimes. And it's just so vital that that's what you're thinking of too, when you're trying to reach the audience. I want to ask you both your thoughts on the description and how important the description that you're writing in there really is. And I think I know the answer, because obviously you two are judging, right? You're there to watch this. You're going to watch it. And the content that you're seeing is really what is going to speak to you. So you don't do, I mean, my guess is you don't need to have, a multi-paragraph essay on what this is to potentially get a good result.
Well, again, from the programming point of view, I let the content speak to me, but also use that as a reference and a guide in case I have any questions. Maybe Diana can speak to it from a news point of view.
I'll just say really quickly, I think you really need to be careful because just like a promo is a promise, so is that description. So, make sure that what you're saying is going to show up in there. And, I kind of look at it just personally as an entrant, not even as a judge. As an entrant, I look at that's a place where you can distract someone again. And I don't want to do that. I want, as James said, I want the content to be what you judge. So, for me, I think less is more. And particularly when we're talking about the categories, PSAs, promos, that are shorter form. I don't really want to sit there and read 45 seconds worth of copy for a 30-second spot.
Good point. Diana, what are your thoughts on this? Because I'd love to hear the news perspective as well for judging.
Well, I think truly that the entry speaks, the content and the entry speaks for itself, but it doesn't hurt to have a little explanation or a little description of maybe what you're trying for. But War and Peace, it isn't. So if you have a really long thing, and if as a person who's judge, and Jamie knows this, if you're judging a 17-hour documentary panel, you don't necessarily need to read excessive volumes of descriptions, but short, pithy, or clever, or factual description that's well written doesn't hurt either.
And
Yeah.
speaking of 17-hour categories, it's a really good point, because it really, let's say it's 5 hours, being realistic. That's still a really long time. And taking into consideration the judge's point of view, they're sitting there for 5 hours. So again, they're looking for, honestly, I can watch 15 videos and I'm going to say 12 of them are very solid. You're not going to enter your entry unless you really think it's solid. So you think it's solid, it is solid. But what is it that's really going to make it sing to be a little bit more or a lot more than those 15 entries that are really solid, and that's what you have to think about when you're putting your reel together, because like somebody had asked the one program as opposed to the 3 segments. Well, if your one program is really fantastic, I would lead with that, because that's going to really get somebody's attention and say, you know what, those others were really solid, but it has a little bit better editing. The writing speaks more to the subject. It flows better. It has a beginning, middle, and end. So those are just some things to think about.
And can I just say, when they're talking about judging, they're talking about judging other chapters. So, we exchange entries with other chapters. So we're not judging, there's no Chicago judging Chicago, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to reiterate that. And our entries are all over the country in terms of judges. So
That's a really good point, Rebekah, just because, we're all, Midwestern journalists all working in these markets, and, everybody knows everybody. So it's not, that's why we send them to other chapters where there are fewer, possibilities of favoritism or connection or something like that would influence.
And there are strong rules about, if there is a connection, don't judge.
Right, exactly. In terms of, and I think you all have talked about what really you're looking for so far in good Emmy entries. You want something that's captivating. You want something that is strong right from the start, and really grabs you and takes you on that train for the entirety of your viewing experience. What are some of the flip sides of that? What are some of the turnoffs as judges that you're like, well, this is not it? Why don't we start with you, Cornelius?
Yeah. So, the wonderful part about, judging other areas, you can get to judge long form and short form. But I think one of the, if I were to give advice about particularly short form like promos and PSAs, when, you know, there's like for promos, it's campaign versus single spot. And so I have judged categories where I've seen people put 4 entries in and they're so similar. It's, you know, by the time you see the third one, you're kind of worn out. And it's like, hey, you know, this would have just like, you know, like Jamie was saying, send that your best. What's your best? And if you've got one that is really, you know, that's really good and 2 more that are okay or solid, just go with a single entry. Go with your, you know, put your best foot forward. Be careful of that because, you know, what happens, I think, is, you know, you think you read campaign, it's like, oh, I did 4 spots for this campaign, but were all 4 of them really good spots, you know, or are all 4 of them going to really continue to boost what you send in, or do they start taking away? And I think that's something to be careful of.
How about you, Jamie?
Again, if it's a wide shot for 59 minutes, maybe not a great idea. You know, and I did see that. Okay, it wasn't 59 minutes, but it was, it felt like it. So, you know, you're just looking for, you know, if it's a bad show, maybe you should reconsider. And like Cornelius said, you probably love everything you do, but maybe it isn't great. And that's a harsh take, you know, it's a harsh toke for everyone, but you know, it won't work. But what I do want to recommend to everyone is look at other people's work who have won, you know, for their piece that have won, and see what it is about their piece, because that is a really good way to see, to use that as a guide and a model for what works, and how to form your entry.
That is such great advice. That is huge advice, because if you're looking at that and you're seeing, oh, this is what an Emmy winning, you know, report, anything looks like, you can try to emulate that in your work, you know, and see, right? What is imitation is the greatest form of flattery, right? If that would be, it's flattering to do that. So try and do that, and that can really improve your work as well. I want to remind everybody too that if you do have questions about, you know, what Emmy judges are looking for, you know, the best way to submit something, please continue to ask your questions in the chat box. We will be happy to answer as many of them as we can in the time allotted. So please feel free, if you're, you know, if you have any burning questions about this, don't hesitate to just ask them. And Diane, I want to ask you, in terms of your thoughts on an Emmy, you know, on turnoffs for the news categories, what sort of is there any difference from what these two have been saying?
Well, one thing, it doesn't hurt to reread things just to make sure that your Emmy entry isn't semi-illiterate. You know, if you have misspellings and things, it kind of may be a turn into, we were talking about turnoffs before, they might judge it harshly if it's error ridden, for example. And the other thing that people have, you know, they have, maybe you did 6 specials and you can't decide which to enter. And it's like, if you can't figure out which one is better than the other, how are the judges going to be able to figure it out? So you do sort of need to be your own best critic, or look at it from different perspectives before you make your choices.
Great advice. And Rebekah, you put some good advice in the comments section. Can you just reiterate that for us here? Because I think it's really, what you said was really important. Ask your colleagues, ask your friends, what were some of the memorable things that they saw you put together that year?
It's hard to judge yourself, you know? So I think you need to ask other people what they remember, you know? Don't ask your mom, but ask your colleague. These are things that I put in the chat that are in our, it's a document that we did years ago about how to think about what you're entering, and, you know, just thoughts that we had. So
Yes, good advice there. We do have a question from Maria B. For the multimedia category, can only one story be submitted, or can it be a composite of multiple stories worked on as an MMJ for the eligible period?
It can be multiple. We had the MMJ category a few years ago, and we didn't get a lot of entries. This is when MMJs first came around. So we're trying it again. And if there are, it's possible we could add more MMJ categories as if the volume of entries is greater. But you can do a composite because it's in the craft category. You could do 3 examples, for example, or whatever the time limit is on your MMJ work, if you want to show a wide variety of how you do a serious or breaking or hard news or lighter or arts and crafts or whatever your specialties are, you could do a variety there to show your range.
Okay, fantastic answer. Thank you. In terms of submissions, if anybody can, if any of our panelists feel up to it, I mean, what was something you may have submitted in years past that you may have been unsure of rather, and why did you feel that way, and how did it kind of turn out? Does anybody remember one? Yeah. Okay, yeah. Cornelius, go for it.
Yeah, I'll jump in. You know, as I said, you know, my world, you know, I'm marketing and promo. So my world is, you know, 30 seconds, you know, I live my life 30 seconds at a time, but we, you know, we have the opportunity to produce some things outside of that, you know, because, you know, we have the resources. So we produced a couple of documentaries, and wasn't sure about it because I had never looked at any of the other categories, to be quite honest. I would go straight to whatever it was for spot promotions and PSAs. But what I will say, and I don't know if Rebekah even remembers this, but you know, it was a few years ago, and I just thought, hey, we got these 2 things, and she's like, hey, here are the possible categories, and it was, you know, and so we had 2 different documentaries, or 2 separate categories. We put them in, and they were both nominated. So I think, you know, like saying, you know, read, and if you don't read, I mean, if you don't understand, because, you know, sometimes, you know, there are a lot of questions, then reach out. I will give, you know, Rebekah and Diana credit. They are very open to, you know, answering questions, you know, to have such power that they have. They're really, really nice people to get to know and work with. So do that. And like I say, you know, and then you probably can ask, you know, if you work in a news organization, there's so many people that have entered over the years, you know, ask other, you know, people that have done it, and maybe you can get that clarification.
I would say that I've entered, I worked on a show once that wasn't sure of what the category was. It was the Golden Apple Awards that honored teachers. So one year we put it in, I think, for public affairs maybe, and one year we put it in for a different category, and maybe it didn't win in one category and it won in another. I can't remember exactly which category it won in, but sometimes you do have to try different categories until you get the right fit. And I just wanted to say one other thing regarding watching different works. A good way to do that, if I might, is by judging Emmys. So if you haven't done that yet, you hit us up, because that's a really great way to see other people's work from other chapters, and to see what's really good.
That's great advice. Absolutely. When you're thinking, I know we kind of talked about this in terms of what grabs you at the beginning and how important that beginning is. How important are first impressions when you're watching the content that is being submitted? And Diana, I'd like to start with you. How important is that first impression of what you're seeing?
Well, anything that grabs your attention right away certainly goes up a notch. The judge can look at, there are time limits, and depending on the entry length, if it's a 60-minute show, some chapters rule that you have to watch 25%, 50%, or 75% of it. So with the online judging, you can watch the first 10 minutes and then skip ahead and watch the middle, and then you can watch the end. So you do have some flexibility as a judge to get, but I am a documentary junkie, so I end up watching, almost every frame of it. So, but I do think that, the compelling open is good, but, you have to follow through. It can't just be flash and dash in the beginning. So, the other thing that people have trouble with is deciding what category to put something in. And I've been asked many times, even though the descriptions are there, what's the difference between societal concerns and human interest? And those are, you could probably make a case for either one if you have a story on or a program on either of those, but they're sort of catch-all categories, but they, as a result, they have a lot of entries. So sometimes if you're category shopping, those might be ones to reconsider because they have so many entries. So you might have a better chance in something that's less popular.
Right. And more specific to the work you've created. That's good. Okay. Yeah, good advice there. Let's talk about potential. Are there fixable mistakes on a submission? What in terms of I'm sure there ways you can, or I guess I'm asking because I'm curious as well. Are there ways to fix a submission if you realize a mistake has been made after you've submitted? And maybe Rebekah can speak to this.
Are you talking about like the video, or more like what was listed, like who's listed on the entry?
Let's start with who was listed, and then let's talk about the video. Okay.
So the video, once it's submitted and you pay for it and it's in, that's really hard to change. That's why we asked for you to watch it and in its entirety and really think about it, because to change a video is not an easy task. And it's one that we really can't do past June. So, and in terms of like listings of names, we do release, like I said earlier, a master list in August, early September that has everyone's listing and what the categories are and everything. So we asked you to really look at that before nominations to say, okay, is this what I wanted, who I wanted to list? That kind of thing. So then, yes, you can make those changes. Then there is a small fee. So
Gotcha.
I want to mention one other thing about change, and that is occasionally we will have judges from another chapter judging us and say this entry is in the wrong category. And so they are instructed to judge it without prejudice about if it's in the wrong category or not, just judge it on its merits. And then the Emmy Rules Committee will look at those. If somebody's questioned that, we'll look at the show and their questions about it and make a determination. And then whatever status it had, whether it was a nominee or a winner, it might be moved to a more appropriate category, but it won't be necessarily rejudged. So whatever the judging on it will stand, but it might be moved. So that's one thing that could be changed after the fact. And then the entrant is informed of that.
Okay, that is interesting.
That there was a judge's challenge and it's been acted upon. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, let's talk about, since we're talking about judging, what are the judging requirements here? And how do you judge a piece? And I see there's a slide up right here. Diane, you can take it.
Judging requirements are that you have to have at least 2 years in the business to be a judge, at least, because we're looking for peer judges, and we try to find, like, if it's a craft category of anchor, we try to get anchors or news directors or executive producers to judge that, people who make those decisions and who are in that peer group. And when we have news excellence, we try to get news directors to judge it. At station excellence, we try to get general managers or news directors to judge. So the requirements are that at least 2 years in the business to be a judge.
Okay.
But then you also see on there just in terms of timing and such.
Right. Okay, I see that. Yep. When you think about there was a good question here from Hermine again. Your thoughts on commercials within an entry. Should you delete them if it's an entry that spans, multiple commercial breaks?
Yes, you should not have commercials in it.
Yes. Take
Great.
them out. Yeah.
Take them out. Okay, got it. And in terms of a submission, if it aired with a mistake in it, so a wrong graphic or a chyron that was misspelled, like something glaring, should or can you edit it to correct it?
No, it's supposed to be as aired.
As aired.
So you don't do post-production edits to fix your mistakes.
Okay, there you go. Are there any other audience questions at this point? I'd just like to open it up to the floor to if anybody else has questions about what you can submit, how to submit, anything that's on your mind at this point. And if not, I'll be waiting for your for the little Q&A thing to pop up if you do have questions. But I just want to read this to you too, because we've been talking about this when you're submitting to be really mindful and be thoughtful about what you are submitting, what category it's in, and etc. So it says be mindful. An entry should begin immediately. Avoid color bars and slates. Countdowns should last no longer than 4 seconds. Dips to black should last no more than 2 seconds. And as we just discussed, for credibility, enter your segment as aired. Don't do any post-production editing to try and fix a mistake if one is in a submission you'd like to put forth. If from a master, mix the audio onto both tracks. Split tracks from separate channels will distract the judges. Catch your mistakes in advance, and always watch your submissions from beginning to end before you send it in. So be very mindful about what you're sending in. I think from a technical aspect, that's interesting. The mix it down to don't do split audio tracks. I think that's interesting because you're right. If you're watching it at home or on a computer, for instance, and you have sound just coming from one speaker on the right or one speaker on the left, yeah, that's going to take away from the overall experience of what you're seeing. So that's really, really a good thing to remember as well. We do have one more question here. Sam F says, in a craft category, if we cut a 50-minute program down to 15 minutes by using 5 3-minute sections, is that considered a composite?
It's one program.
Right. If we cut a 50-minute program, one program down to 15 minutes by using 5 3-minute sections, is that considered a composite?
So you're not editing it again. What you're doing is just taking lifts from the program and putting black in between those lifts. So you're not taking an original program and then re-editing it so it's only 15 minutes long. You know what I'm saying? So
Yes.
you're taking segments and you're lifting them and putting black between them. So yes, that would be considered. If it's from the same program, it's not really a composite because it would just be that program that you're entering.
Right, and the craft is limited, it has a limited time period. So you have an hour music show, for example, and you're editing. You have to, but they have to be in chronological order. You can't shuffle them. But if you have to reduce it to the time allotment for a craft. So it's not a composite. Usually composites are from you're showing your work from 3 different shows or something. So
Mhm.
this it would be if it's one show, it's not considered a composite.
Got it. That's okay. A really good detail to have there. We have Lance M asking, in 400 programming content, can a news magazine enter individual segments from the show in individual categories like lifestyle, human interest, arts and entertainment, etc.?
No.
Diana, do you want to tackle this one?
No, basically, if you have a magazine show, there's magazine program and then magazine program segments. So you could enter some segments that aren't in your program entry in the magazine segment categories, but you can't category shop by taking your show and dividing it by topical thing and putting it in 6 different categories. That would be flagged and disqualified, or they would all be moved into magazine segment.
Got it. Okay. Let's see if there's any other Q&As here. Okay, it looks like those. Does anybody else have any other questions out there? I saw one person ask if this will be available for download. I believe it will be available for viewing online at a later date if you want to take a look at it again. But does anybody? Oh, go ahead.
I know Dee Gresham asked about sports excellence.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, if I haven't judged, I'm not a judge, but I don't know if anyone's judged sports excellence. I would think it's fairly similar to news excellence in the sense that you're putting in examples of how you covered sports throughout the year, and then writing a narrative, writing a description that describes your different endeavors.
And one thing that's evolved through the years in sports is that originally it was just the TV stations having sports segments or sports specials on a Saturday night recap of the Bears or whatever. But now a lot of the teams have their own production companies. So and a lot of their sports channels like Marquee and Bally Sports and NBC Sports Chicago. So that there's a lot of emphasis on sports. So sports excellence could be how you do live sports, how you do studio sports, how your play-by-play and sideline reporters do. So there's an opportunity for teams and sports channels that didn't exist 20 years ago or 10 years ago even. So this is a way for them to enter an overall excellence category with the broad strokes of what they do.
Right. So they would include different examples from what they do throughout the year. They think speaks to, sports excellence.
Okay.
Dee, does that make sense? I'm asking Dee because he just want to make sure.
And hopefully there'll be some championship parades in there for all of us.
Oh my gosh, right? Please. That would be fantastic. Well, I just wanted to say thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you all for your expertise and your time today, enlightening us about how to make sure that we're doing as much of this properly as we can, and what really makes a good Emmy entry. And Afua, I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to say to wrap us up. Here we go. Text for help. If you have any questions, as Cornelius was saying earlier, if you have any questions, Diana and Rebekah, you see her information here. They are so helpful. And obviously, they have a wealth of knowledge in terms of, giving thoughts on what categories. And if you have questions about specifics or anything like that, please don't hesitate to reach out. You see the slate right here with Rebekah's information on it, her phone number or email. I know, Rebekah, in June, you're going to be on vacation, but if you have questions.
Yeah. So the first week of June, this was the only week that we could find. I have 3 kids where the kids weren't in camp or somewhere else or in college or starting college or in a play or something like that. So this was it. The first
You know
week of
what? Needs
June,
must.
which is not a good week for mom, but it's, we wanted to do a family trip for years. So that first week of June, I'm gonna be out. But Diana is around.
And I should point out that Jamie and I are the co-chairs of the Emmys, so she has a broad range of expertise as well, but
Right, right. So I will be checking, emails and stuff like that, and I could probably change things within the Emmy Express system if there's changes needed. But the early deadline is June 14th. We do have a late deadline of June 21st, but there is some added, fee to that. So, just keep that in mind. May is a great time to get in contact with us, to ask questions. That's why we have the call for entries open now, because we want to encourage everyone to look at it and to ask questions. That week before, like the week of right before June 14th is the busiest time in terms of like trying to get a hold of us and get answers answered and stuff like that. We'll do our very best to reply to you. It's best just to text me as well. That's my cell phone, so texting me is a good way to get in contact with me as well that week of. So, and I want to encourage you, like, if you're having trouble like with uploads and stuff, that's a common question I got, is not uploading. Just breathe and just try to find a time when no one else, maybe at your home or at the station, is using the Wi-Fi, because it's all about like how that Wi-Fi is being used and if it's clogged or busy. It's not Emmy Express per se, it's just about the Wi-Fi that's happening.
Thank you, Rebekah. Can I ask Jamie and Diana, if you feel comfortable, can you throw your emails into the chat? Make sure that you're chatting to everyone, not to host and panelists. That way, you guys can reach out to Diana or Jamie while Rebekah is away. Kind of want to respect that time. She doesn't really get much vacation time, and I, as first vice president, would like her to get some rest. So Jamie and Diana are also knowledgeable. They have been doing this for years. They should be your go-to. And then Rebekah should be like the third person you reach to. So you can screenshot Rebekah's information, screenshot Jamie and Diana's information that we put in the chat so that you have that for future. Thank you, Mark, for moderating this discussion today. I know there was it was a whirlwind, and I appreciate you taking the time, especially you just got off air. So I appreciate that.
Of course, no problems. Happy to do it.
And thank you to both Diana and Jamie and Cornelius for spending your Saturday morning chatting with us. Please, again, I just, Jamie, you sent it to host and panelists. If you can send it to everyone.
Oh, okay. Here, I can do it.
Sorry, couldn't find it.
No, you're totally fine. You're totally fine. I just, I have to expand my computer in order to get it.
Here, I just sent it out. Diana's email and then also Jamie's email.
So Diana's email's on the top, and then Jamie's email's on the bottom. So screenshot those or copy and paste them, because when this Zoom closes, you will lose all of this information. So we just want to make sure that you have that. And again, reading through everything is super important. If you have questions, we didn't really talk that much about double dipping. Rebekah, can you quickly explain the double dipping rule?
Okay.
Well, that will also give people time to screenshot. So
No, that's okay. So basically, double dipping is you can't get 2 Emmy awards for the same content performing the same exact role. So if you listed yourself as an anchor in newscast, right? And then you put that same material that you entered in newscast in a composite for anchor, and if you won both, you'd be winning an Emmy for the exact same position with the same content. So does that make sense? That's essentially what double dipping is. So
That makes total sense.
Yeah,
You can't win an
So-
Emmy for the same content performing the same thing twice
right,
in two
right.
different categories. Yeah.
So that's why we, put it in there so many times, like when you're making a composite of your work, just make sure like that material from that composite is not in the news or the programming categories, and you're listed as at the same exact role. So, and we recognize that, people play all sorts of roles these days. You are the producer, you are the host, you are, you do a lot of different roles. So each category, especially within crafts, is supposed to recognize that particular role. So if you're really proud of your editing, please enter as an editor in editing.
Fantastic. Okay, I think that about wraps it up for everybody. Afua, is there anything else?
No, I think so too. Thank you again. Listen, if this is if you're a student or you're a professional and you're new to this area and this is the first time, just would like to encourage you to go to Chicago Emmy online to learn more about the organization, to learn more about the Emmy process, to see past award winners. They're listed if you want to do some Googling to see their stories. And it's just an opportunity for you to look at the workshops that we've done in the past. This, again, to reiterate, this recording will be placed on our website under workshops. All of our past workshops too are pretty much recorded and put online, except for the ones that are in person. And then again, our scholarships are offered yearly to students. So if you're interested, please look up that information online. Again, thank you to everyone for giving your time this morning. It's a beautiful sunny day in the city, so go step outside, enjoy it before we get a thunderstorm or something. Thank you all so much again. Please.
Afua, do you want to talk about any upcoming workshops too?
Oh gosh, yeah. Before I go, I'm very excited about this. We're starting a Legends series, and it's just an opportunity for past Chicago media titans to share their stories, talk about their historic careers and lessons learned, and just kind of recap their career. But it's going to be done conversation style. So the first one that we're launching is with Diane Burns of ABC and CBS. Yeah, for those of you who grew up in this area, you might have watched Diane Burns on ABC7 for almost like 20 years before she transitioned over to CBS, and then now is a media consultant. But anyway, she's gonna join us in a conversation with Courtney Hall on June 8th. That is 4 Saturdays from now at 11 a.m. The information is on our website. Just click under workshops. I don't know why I clicked like I'm actually doing a touch screen. But anyway, please, I'm really excited about this. Diane has many stories and wants to clear the air on some misconceptions. And I just think it's a great opportunity for us to hear how she became the first Black person to anchor the primetime newscast in Chicago. So she's got a good story, and we're excited to have her join us. And then we also have a social media workshop coming up, exploring how to navigate social media as more eyes are turning to it for a news source, what we as journalists can do. When I first started, the idea of using social was kind of like an added, like, oh, now we have to write for web and social. But I think more people are seeing the value, and this workshop is going to explore that, but also some things to consider about what you're posting online, especially if you're a student, and how that might translate when you're job hunting. And that, I believe, we chose the date of June 22nd. And that right, Rebekah?
Yeah, it's not on our website yet, but will be soon.
We just finalized that like Thursday at 3 p.m. So we'll have that information coming out to you with the list of panelists, and we're excited to have that. That will be our last workshop for the season, and then we're all focused on Emmys. So thank you so much again, everyone. I appreciate your time. Again, screenshot the emails and phone numbers that are in the website before I just close out this Zoom. So I'll give you a count. I'll do a wrap, right? I'll do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.